So everyone, hope everyone's doing well. So this is episode 9 of the Rugby Recap. You have myself as well as the Q lads. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, mate. The reason I got a hat on is because my hair was up in all sorts of directions, so I had to make sure that it was relatively flat. Although something that doesn't look flat are the two sides that we're going to be talking about for their Rugby World Cup teams. It's looking exciting. The ABs, the Springboks, few other international teams announcing them as well. Mainly the Pacific Island sides. We've seen Samoa, Fiji, Tonga yet to, but they're playing Canada tomorrow or today, depending on when this comes out.
Exactly. But before we kind of get into it, just want to address that I am actually in a different country, guys. I'm not in my normal,
Same.
location where I do the normally do the videos from in Manchester, but I'm actually in Belgium, just for the week. So for the next few videos you may see on this channel, on my channel in particular, you'll see them maybe in Belgium. But again, we'll kind of just crack on straight into this. But
Have you had any chocolate yet?
no, but actually, my mate actually went to like a chocolate factory and got like a bunch load of chocolate, and like he got it like for like a really cheap price actually, because like they would sell it normally for like I don't know for the stuff he bought it for like 70 euros, but normally all of it would come like each thing would be probably priced at around like 200 euros each, like something for a lot of this. So you got some pretty good a pretty good discount essentially by going to the factory and in person, but yeah, no, it's been good. It's been good. Again, I've only been a few days here, but we'll do a lot more, and maybe I can tell a bit more of what's happened maybe on my channel. But yeah, no, again, we'll start with the All Blacks because then they were the first kind of I guess squad that we'll talk about that really kind of announced their squad. I mean, I think we'll just we'll go by the forwards and then the backs. So really, just with the forwards. I mean, was there any shocks that that stood out for you immediately when you saw that?
Four pack, not so much. They did go with the six props. People were debating whether or not
Yeah.
they'd go with 5 or 6, maybe Nipple or Lala. It seemed to be was the guy who people thought would miss out. We got to see pretty much everyone from the Rugby Championship in except for Josh Lord when it came to the locking duo, and also Samapeni Finau when it came to the loose forward trio. So Sam Cane's skipper, I know that's split opinions again. It always seems to. But yeah, overall, they've gone with relatively similar to what a lot of people expected to see. I don't think there were any real wild cards in that 4-pack. Backline, slightly different story with one player returning from injury. But of the players who are here, of course, we always talk about the players who are in the best form. Who do you think was the player that got very lucky to be able to be selected? To be honest, for me, to a certain extent, I'm going to say maybe Brodie Retallick due to the fact that he could be injured for quite a few weeks. I want to see him back after that first little patch, but the problem they've got is they needed a lot for those first couple games because currently they've only got 3. And by ditching Samapeni Finau, that means if we see a Whitelock, a Barrett, or a Vati injury, the All Blacks have no cover, which is pretty dangerous in those first few games of the World Cup. Like I said, I would have loved to see Brodie Retallick maybe get added into the squad after 2 or 3 rounds or so, or maybe even the All Blacks take an extra lock just in case, whether it is Josh Lord or the cover of Finau. I just think looking at the overall team, we're very light on locks for the ABs.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that because the thing is like with Retallick, the timeline really for him to kind of come back, to come into the tournament. I mean, to what I've heard, I could be wrong on this, but like he'll maybe come back into the 3rd game of the tournament. That's kind of what I've heard, like kind of in terms of the timeline. But again, when you have something like Retallick, you're definitely going to hedge your bet towards him because he's just been such a great player for the All Blacks in the recent years that you're definitely going to kind of say like, well, we're going to accept you kind of being out obviously for the first 2 games and then just persevere with you, of course, into the following games in the group stage as well as the knockouts, because his ability alone isn't obviously going to help them dictate games really, because he's just that crucial of a player. But I guess you could also say maybe, by the way, Shana Vizel could maybe cover that locking position if they needed to. But again, do you really want Shana Vizel to be there if he's kind of now set in stone as the 6? It's a big debate, but if I had to say really the surprise admission, I'd say, well, not the mission, but really just the surprise name in terms of the 4-pack. I don't know why, but the one that kind of caught me, did it caught me off guard? I guess it kind of did, but it was really more, I guess, like Fletcher Newell, just because we haven't seen him in a lot. I think like Fletcher Newell is just one of those players where, again, we know he's obviously, I guess, around in the frame, but really like within the rugby championship, they really just went with the likes of Ethan Groot and Tyler Lomax, the starting props, and then when he came off the bench, it was really just more either had Ofatunga Fasi, Nepalala, or Tamati Williams. So it really did seem that they were actually going to go with 5 because, again, you have to remember that Ofatunga Fasi and Tamati Williams can cover both positions. So I felt like they had a bit of, I guess, I don't know, versatility actually in that area, which is really uncommon actually when you look at other teams, by the way. And so I just think that's, I don't know, I feel like they could have gone with 5 and then, like you said, maybe go for an extra lock. They put in Josh Lord in that sense. But I don't know. I'm happy with Fletcher Newell, to be perfectly honest. There's nothing wrong really with him. I just felt like, because again, like you said, there's not really too many surprising, I'd say, players that kind of missed out, you could say, or I guess surprising admissions. I guess the big one you could maybe say is Finau. But at the end of the day, I didn't think he would get in just because I just think there's other players that are going to kind of prioritize over him. But yeah, no, it's understandable. And I guess I'm just happy for Luke Jacobson as well. Good to see, obviously, him because he can cover all 6 or all 3 of the loose 4 positions. I mean, but yeah, I guess in terms of the we'll go on then towards the backs. What did you think then in terms of the backs? Was there any, I guess, glaring, I guess, like players that were like, whoa, like they actually got in, or was there the opposite to it, like where you're like, oh, okay, wow, like this player actually missed out? Like, how did that happen? Like, what was your thoughts on that?
I think David Havili was always a little bit of a doubt for a lot of people due to him only just coming back from injury. I think the massive thing that helped him was the fact that he played for Tasman and the Bunnings NBC in round number 1. He only played half a game, but it showed them enough to go, okay, he is going to be match fit and ready to go by the time we get to France, because we've got to remember the All Blacks, they've still got a couple more weeks until their first warm-up game.
Exactly.
And then a couple of weeks after that, they're straight into the action. So he was probably a little bit of the surprising one, seeing as he was the only player who wasn't in the Rugby Championship squad. Overall, though, with Enor being injured, Dallas McLeod, unfortunately, they just didn't back him enough throughout the Rugby Championship, only got himself a very small amount of time out there on the field. Reading through, though, they've got Geordie Barrett, they've got David Havili, those are your inside centres, which makes me think Anton Leonard-Brown might take more of an outside centre role, just because, or else Rieko Ioane is expected to do quite a bit, although Lester Nuku, another man who can play 13. So maybe we get to see Havili and Lester Nuku as a little bit of a midfield combo for the ABs in one of those games. Just an idea, seeing as they have got quite a few outside backs, including Caleb Clark. He was one that I think was almost 50-50 down the middle. Would he make it? Would he not? I did a poll on our live stream when we were announcing the side. I said in the question, will Caleb Clark make the All Blacks? 53% said yes, 47% said no, and there are around 300 votes. Yeah, so he definitely splits people down the middle, but he has made it. He's made it rather than someone like a Sean Stevenson. I mentioned, I think it was on that last live stream, how I said that I felt that there were quite a few of those backs all playing for that same spot. Sean Stevenson and Amoni Narawa, I thought were playing a very similar role in terms of trying to get in, and they did go with Narawa, which I am glad to see because at the end of the day, he did nothing really wrong for the ABs. Only issue was that injury. Otherwise, I think he would have got maybe a little bit more game time. In the Rugby Championship, scrum halves, they've gone Aaron Smith, Finley Christie, Cam Roigard. Are you happy with those 3? That's the big question.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the main area for me, which kind of caught me. I was like, whoa. I was like, geez, like they've actually done it. Like they actually took the risk, gone with Roigard. I think at the end of the day, you're always going to go Aaron Smith. So that was obviously no doubt in that sense. But with Finley Christie, there was a bit of, I guess you could have a bit of doubt because you weren't sure if they would, I don't know, go back maybe towards Brad Weber in that sense. But really, I mean, it came down towards, the third position because that's really where you had Brad Weber, Cameron Roigard, as well as Folau Fakatava. And again, you have to remember that, Brad Weber and Folau Fakatava was playing for the All Blacks XV team, which obviously played against, Japan really, or I think it was, for 2 games. But I guess like the All Blacks just looked at those 2 games and were just like, I don't think they'll be able to kind of help in those positions compared to what maybe Roigard has done within what we've seen so far from the Rugby Championship. So I think they've actually made the right call here. I think Roigard is, I mean, I've said this a lot of times already, but he is really like, in my opinion, like New Zealand's version of what you have like DuPont. where he's really more of a try-scoring, scrum half. Like New Zealand haven't had that in a very long time. Like when I recall back towards the scrum halves they've had, I mean, Aaron Smith has obviously been there for a majority of the time, by the way, guys. So I don't really consider Aaron Smith as a try-scoring scrum half. I really see him as more like a playmaker, and that's what scrum halves are really known to be. But again, I mean, you had Perry Reboot back in the day, obviously in 2011 as well, playing as a scrum half, but you could say technically a fly half because he was kicking the ball a lot. But yeah, just it's exciting to see what Roy Gardner can do, because I really like what he'll bring even after this Rugby World Cup, because I do think Scott Robinson could maybe utilize him a bit more in that aspect. But yeah, I guess in terms of the other positions, you kind of covered the majority of it. I mean, really, I guess Molinaro, good to see obviously him included. It's crazy because really it was between, like you said, him and Sean Stevenson, and they had one season to really prove it. Probably the best season to do it. The Rugby World Cup year in Super Rugby. I mean, and yeah, the Chiefs just had a great season, and it was really down towards him and Stevenson, and they obviously went with Amoni in that sense. So yeah, no, I like the call. I really do like the call, because again, there's not a lot of guys who would actually get one season to show what they're worth and actually get in to the All Black squad. I mean, that's pretty impressive, because there's another name I want to mention later down the line in this where it links back towards the All Blacks, and kind of a similar case to this, but the opposite happens. So but no, really just overall, I think it's a good squad for the All Blacks. I think they've done really just what you kind of expected. Good to see obviously Havili in there, but I feel bad for Enor. I think that's probably the one name, if I had to say, I feel bad that he's missed out. I think that's probably the one player I would say. But yeah, no, overall, pretty happy with that. Again, we'll then move on, I guess, towards the
although, before we move on,
yeah.
You ready for me to play devil's advocate?
Let's see.
Finley Christie. I don't think he should be there.
Really?
Okay. I think from what we've seen in the Rugby Championship, and I believe a lot of people would agree as well, he doesn't seem to work well with Richie Mo'unga or Damian McKenzie. And that for me is a little bit concerning, because at the end of the day, if he's not going to be able to work well with the 10 outside him, and they are the two main 10s, that's where some issues could start to arise. He works very well with a few of the other players in that backline, mainly because of that Blues chemistry. But I think a lot of people, from what they've seen in the last Rugby Championship and also throughout maybe the back end of Super Rugby Pacific, it just seemed like that ball wasn't quite getting out there quick enough for a lot of people's liking. And I think that is one point of that is because you're comparing him a little bit to Aaron Smith in that AB's jersey, and of course no one quite passes the ball like him. Yeah. I do see, though, that they have got, I believe it's a list of about 3 or 4 players who are down as injury cover, which did include Brad Weber, Sama Penifino, I believe is still maybe even like those two traveling with the squad, and Sean Stevenson may also fall into that category.
Interesting.
So whether or not we see any injuries for the All Blacks throughout that first game up against the Springboks, or maybe their first game up against France of the Rugby World Cup, could determine who actually goes through and who misses out. But yeah, I think throughout most of the Rugby Championship, you and myself, we were picking our 9s and our 21 being Aaron Smith and Cam Roigard, if I'm not wrong, mainly because we felt that Roigard offered that little bit more for the All Blacks due to the way that he's able to get them on the front foot. I don't know whether or not I'm being too harsh. Normally I'm pretty on the fence, but I just feel like Christie out of that whole side was the player I looked at and went, is that the right call for the ABs, or could it end up possibly costing them?
So it's interesting. So you're kind of technically saying that Roigard is seen as your second option in terms of the scrum halves.
Out of these 3, I would say yes.
Okay. Well, I guess the argument towards that is really where I would say, when you look at Aaron Smith, Cameron Roigard, and Finley Christie, the reason I believe they've chose Finley Christie is because I think he's the mix of both between Aaron Smith and Roigard. He's he's a balance between where he's a good passing scrum half, but also he's known for scoring tries. So it's one of those where I think you also want to have a bit of balance in that sense. And I think that's what he kind of offers you, because he's a whole package. He offers you the whole package rather than what. By the way, I'm not saying Aaron Smith doesn't offer you that, but he's not known for try scoring. So that's one area of his game which he does lack in, compared to the likes of Roigard, where it's that's probably one of the things you grade him on, probably the highest in terms of Roigard's abilities. So it's definitely, I think that's what Finley Christie adds to that, I guess, like backup position in terms of making an impact. But like you said, it really comes down towards, I guess, the opponent you face, because the reason why you and me obviously chose Roygaard to go against the Wallabies was because we thought that Roygaard against the Wallabies just makes more sense in my opinion, because they like, even like the Wallabies, they love using their attacking scrum half. They use Tim McDermott to use like their try scoring scrum half, and they always kind of have that. So that's the reason why we always kind of made the argument, because we'd love to see McDermott versus Roygaard, because that's like it'd be a good battle. But I think at the end of the day, we actually didn't see that for the period, so it's a bit unfortunate. But really, that's kind of what we were making the comparison with. But when you look back at like Finley Christie, I just think if you're like in a World Cup final, I'd rather have Finley Christie off the bench than Roygaard. Let's just say that, because he brings you a lot more balance and control, and I'm more confident in what Finley Christie can do as a player. But he won't like make as many mistakes compared to Roygaard, because you have to remember Roygaard is still very young. Like he's what, 22, I believe. He's like very young in his career, and it's incredible how good he is now. By the way, guys, he's actually incredible for what he's showcased already, and just for him to get into the World Cup squad is like it's amazing, because his experience obviously will kind of elevate him going into the next one. Because I have no doubt if he just continues his form, I'm not saying he has to be he doesn't have to have as brilliant a season as he had, because again, to have 9 tries from your opening season was incredible for a starter. But just if you can continue that, leading up to the next World Cup, then I can definitely see him as my kind of first choice scrum half. But again, it really depends on how, I guess, the future in terms of what Robertson, in terms of his style of play. So obviously that's kind of a different way in terms of thinking compared towards Ian Foster. But in terms of Ian Foster and what he likes, he does actually like a passing 9, and I just think that's what kind of edges it, I think, for Finley Christie over Roygaard in terms of that backup position. But
okay, so I'm going to quickly ask you a question right at the end of this, just because I'm curious.
Because
you said about the World Cup final, having Aaron Smith, I would assume, is your starting.
Oh, yeah. And then I'd have Finley Christie as the...
And then you said you'd take Christie over Roygaard as the man off the bench.
Yes, 100%.
Better question, would you take Weber over Christie off the bench if it was available?
If Weber was available...
If Weber was in the squad, would you have taken him over Finley Christie off that bench?
See,
here's one for you as well. I'm going to put Damian McKenzie as the number 22.
No, exactly.
And I'm going to put Richie Morgan as the starting player. I could tell that was what was ticking over.
This is what makes it difficult, because I would immediately say no, because you would assume Mwanga would be the 10. And in my opinion, to what we've seen in the past, when Weber and Mwanga, they haven't actually played a lot together in terms of the All Black setup. So in my opinion, I don't think that would work as well. But like you said, if you have McKenzie coming off the bench, then it makes it interesting. But the problem with that, though, is that if you have McKenzie off the bench, you're actually going to have less minutes anyway with that combination. So I don't know. I personally would still stick with Christie. I think it's one of those where I think you have to stick with Christie, because he is. I mean, I think a lot of people just underestimate how well he's actually, just how well he's actually progressed throughout, since I say 2020 to like this World Cup. I mean, since he joined the Blues, like he's really just elevated this game. I think I'm not even saying this from a Blues fan perspective. I'm just saying it as just looking at him as a rugby player, and just, I guess, in terms of his growth, you can definitely tell he's improved throughout the last 3 years. So I've been impressed on that front, and yeah, I think that's the reason why he's been, I guess, selected over the likes of Brad Weber and that, because he's allowed to be, I don't know, you could say, has he been more consistent than Brad Weber? I think that's probably the biggest question, actually. I can kind of, do you think Brad, in the space of like when Christie is, let's just say it like this, do you think in the space where when Christie played for the Blues, so since 2020 when he joined the Blues, has been a better player than Brad Weber in that 3 year period of time? It's a tough question, by the way, because both of them have made a final in Super Rugby, and I think in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, there was both of them also made a final in the, I think Blues had the Trans-Tasman, and Chiefs obviously had the Super Rugby Aotearoa. So they've actually both made 2 finals in that sense. So it is very close. But I want to get your take on this. So what do you think?
I think you're better off asking the question of who had the better, most recent Super Rugby Pacific season. Because it's all well and good playing well 3 years ago, but it's a different story in playing well now as you get closer to that World Cup. We've seen so many players have great form, then it drops off. We look at Sam Cane, perfect example.
Yeah.
If you asked what he was doing last year, if he was going to be the number 7, people would punch you in the face. Whereas this year, after the way that he's played in Super Rugby Pacific, they might jab you in the nose, but it wouldn't be anywhere as hard as it would have been last year. So it's got to be that question of who had the better Super Rugby Pacific 2023 and maybe 22 to a certain extent. I feel like, unfortunately, like Christie has had some brilliant moments, I believe, throughout the last year and a bit. But it just consistency-wise, in terms of partnering, if Bowden Barrett was fly half, I would say Christie 110%, because that would be that Blues combo that has been able to build up the chemistry. But I almost think that they've kind of hurt themselves in regards of not playing Christie enough with the two fly halves that they've got currently. Like last year, he was always struggling to get game time, which meant that he didn't get to build up the chemistry then. They're expecting it to have just bloomed out of nowhere for this year. And I think we saw in that game of the Bledisloe when him and Mo'unga were working together, it wasn't working together, unfortunately.
That's the thing is, I didn't actually see that. That's the thing with me when I was watching. I assume we're talking about the first game, right? In terms of
second game.
The
second game.
Okay, well, but that's where the argument, I guess, is that because in the first game he actually played pretty well in terms of work. Actually, no, not the first game because it was Roy Gardner, of course, for that one. But the second game, like you said, I thought there wasn't really was there anything bad which he did because I can't think of like where.
I just think the ball didn't quite get out quick enough, unfortunately,
okay.
for the All Blacks' liking. Because we look at their ruck speed, I guess, for the earlier games of the Rugby Championship, and it was under 3 seconds. But I saw for that game, it was ticking upon that kind of 3.5, 4, which, you know, that whole extra second in the breakdown can be quite a tricky moment. I feel like a journalist, how I'm like poking and prodding. I don't like it, you know. It's like,
well, I like this by the way because do you think then Roygaard was better in terms of his passing game than Finlay Christie?
I think that from that little patch that we got to see from Roygaard, people wanted to see more of him.
Okay,
and I think that's. I guess it's important, of course, to see how the general public react, but at the end of the day, the coaches are the ones who have to make the decisions. They're the ones who see it behind closed doors. But yeah, it seemed to be that a lot of people, if it wasn't in Dunedin, would have had Roygaard in there maybe rather than Aaron Smith, and then we could have got to see what he could have done off the bench for Bledisloe match 2. But with it being in Dunedin, I feel like it just had to be Aaron Smith at the end of the day. But
Aaron Smith came off the bench, though. That's the thing. When it came towards
and the game changed once they made that change.
Exactly. That's the thing. Is that Aaron Smith is he's just flat out. I mean, in my opinion, this is where it gets a big debate in terms of who was the I guess the best scrum half. But I think Dupont is still seen as. I mean, he is the best scrum half in the world. There's no doubt in my mind he is that. But you can never underestimate what Aaron Smith does for the All Blacks. That's the thing. I think that there's one player, I'm not going to say he's underrated actually, because I think everyone rates it very highly. But I think if there's one player who just doesn't get talked about as much compared to other players in the All Blacks, I think it is Aaron Smith. Because again, he's just one of those players who they play off him. They literally that's what the All Blacks do. Because he's so good in doing that. They've said, you know what, we're going to let you have this pressure. We're going to let you hold it because we know you can do it. We've seen it time and time again. And yeah, he's just he's just incredible. He just really he gets on my nerve when the Boks face him because it's like I consider Flapper Kirkby up there as one of the best as well. But whenever he plays against Aaron Smith, it's just frustrating to watch because I can tell Flap is not he has to really step it up if he even wants to be on the level of Aaron Smith. That's kind of the way I see it. But
anyway, with this World Cup coming up for the Springboks, you won't just get to see Faf de Klerk go up against Aaron Smith. If these two sides face off, you got 3 other scrum halves, 4 in total for the Springboks. What did you think of that selection transitioning over to the Boks side?
If we're talking about what caught me off guard to what we said for the All Blacks, that was definitely the one that caught, I think, every Bok fan off guard because there was obviously the debate in terms of, he was going to get, I guess, dropped in terms of that, the three that you would normally go with, in terms of, Flap de Klerk, Jenny Hendricks, Grant Williams, and I believe Kobaslanik. But yeah, it's just incredible because I guess you can say the drop is probably Herschel Yankees, which is remarkable that actually he's not in this squad, because if you went back towards 2019, you'd have said easily he's going to make this squad, because he was a great, kind of I guess rising player, you could say, in terms of the box frame. But yeah, no, it's crazy because now we have Jenny Hendricks and Grant Williams. You could arguably say, are they better than Herschel Yankees? I'm not sure. This is where this is where the whole debate can come up, by the way. But I do believe, Flapper obviously is, similar to what we saw with Aaron Smith. He's the flat out number 9. There's no debate about that. But in terms of the other ones, I am really fascinated about this because I do think this is maybe may be different in this sense, but I actually always wanted Kobaslanik to be selected here. I always like having a player like him in the side, and maybe this is where it's different compared towards the All Blacks and I guess the Boks. But I like having like an experienced 9 in the box setup, because the Boks, I think maybe I just felt they rely more on experience compared to like the likes of the All Blacks now. In the past, that's what the All Blacks were obviously known for. That was like the number one thing the All Blacks were known for. But now you could say they're kind of changing their ways slightly in terms of relying more on youth, you could say, from an All Black perspective. But for the Boks, but particularly in this position, I've always wanted experience. And to have someone like Flap de Klerk and Kobaslanik, I thought was perfect. But when it came down then towards the other 3, in terms of like Jen Hendricks, Grant Williams, and Herschel Yankees, I understand how Herschel Yankees is not included because he just hasn't played enough game time. So I'm pretty happy, actually, that he's not selected overall. I understand the reasons why behind that. So then it then comes down towards Grant Williams and, Jen Hendricks. And for what I've seen, I've been more impressed with Jen Hendricks compared towards Grant Williams. But again, Grant Williams has only been really introduced, you can say, into the side this year. But obviously, he deserves it because going off his form within, the United Rugby Championship, he was brilliant. So it's just, it is tough. It's a tough decision. But yeah, I'm still a bit confused in terms of how they'll, I guess, utilize all 4 of them, because I don't know. Like, I mean, can one of them? Do I not know of reason? Can one of them Scrum-half play another position? I don't know. Is there something I don't know about? Like maybe Jenny Hendricks can play fly-off. I mean, that's what I've been hearing, but but you never know. I mean, maybe they consider Flap de Klerk as a fly-off because he's been kicking a lot recently. But I guess in terms of the backs, I mean, just it's the expected picks, because again, I mean, we'll touch on it now because it's probably the big talking point in terms of this box squad. But Hunter Pollard, Lukaniu not selected in this box squad due to injury, just to be clear. But again, they are in the players on standby. So yeah, they're in there. They're in the frame. But again, we don't actually have a timeline towards when they'll actually come back. Like compared towards Retallick, I have a rough idea of when he'll actually come into the frame. For these 2 players, I actually have no clue when they'll actually come back in. That's the scary thing. Like, I know it's great to see Khaleesi. I mean, we'll go down to more of him, but like, it's just like we don't have a timeline for these 2 players, which is scary. And the thing is that Lukaniu, I mean, his injury, to be frank, I don't actually think he'll make the World Cup. I could be wrong in saying this, but I actually don't think Lukaniu will make the World Cup. Like, he won't play the whole World Cup. But for Hunter Pollard, I think there's actually an opportunity because he's been resting. He's been resting a bit, and I guess like building up his fitness, I guess. But the question is, will we be ready in time? I don't know. Like, do you go with like? This is the big dilemma. Do you go with someone like where you go with Manny Lubbock for the group stages, and then Hunter Pollard's available for the quarterfinal? Do you stick him in the quarterfinal? It's a big call. That it's a huge call, by the way, guys, because it'll be his first game back in. Like, this is why it's just I don't know. I'm actually really scared from a ball perspective because unless Hunter Pollard comes, if he plays like one more game, if he starts the last game, which I believe is against Tonga, if I'm not mistaken, in the group stage, then if he plays that game, then I have a bit more confidence going into that quarterfinal because again, we don't know who he'll be, but it'll most likely be France or New Zealand for what it is. So yeah, I'm scared. I'm scared from that perspective. But yeah, what was your take on that? Like in terms of the backs for this box side?
Well, it is quite interesting with Andre Pollard because now that they've confirmed their 33-man squad, does that mean the only way Handré Pollard can come in is due to some injuries? Because theoretically, with it being confirmed, I would have thought that halfway through a competition, you wouldn't be allowed to say this guy's just coming in for him because we want to switch it because he's back. I would have thought, similar to Brodie Retallick with the All Blacks, how they've decided to name him in the initial squad, I always thought it was only if a player was injured, then you were able to switch them in or out, or else I guess you'd just keep a whole heap of players ready to go for those important games, match fit, ready, and avoid any sort of injury to them. So I am curious. Of course, I don't know the exact reasoning of how you can go in and out with players, but if Handré Pollard is available, like you said, they'll want to have him at least have 1 or 2 group stage matches before they commit to putting him into those big games. Mani Lebok, he's been playing fantastic aside from that kicking tee, and I think that is definitely something
to say, like, that
the Springboks will be worried about, because Damian Valimza, they haven't handed him a kicking tee in about 2 years, because, to be honest, I don't know why. I thought he was kicking all right last time we saw him kicking in the URC, but for some reason they've decided, even though he's going to be playing as a fly half, and even though he has got kicking in his arsenal, they don't want to use that from him, and that could mean that we see Faf de Klerk as the kicker. We could see Chisel and Colby maybe having to line up those kicks. And speaking of Chisel and Colby, of course, out on the right wing, a couple of those halfbacks, I have heard a rumour that says that perhaps they are going to be going with 2 halfbacks on the field, one at 9, one at 14 for their games. Perhaps a little bit of a co-halfback scenario. Try and have 2 out there, getting to that breakdown extremely quickly. And that seems to be the rumour that's going around.
Really?
Or at least what I have heard.
To be fair, that'd be sick, because it means you would have 2 scrum-halves where you get the ball out even quicker. It's what we were, kind of mentioning with, the All Blacks situation. But with Finley Christie's problem, like maybe you have 2 scrum-halves in there. So, like, I don't know, you have Faf de Klerk, and I don't know, you put in Jenny Hendrickson, for example.
I was going to say Grant Williams is probably the most likely they'll put out on that wing, just because he does seem to have that position up his sleeve. But then they've already got quite a few wingers in their side. Kenan Moody, who will be playing at 14. Chisel and Colby out on that side, unless Chiselin's becoming a fullback and Valimza is actually going to be one of those fly halves for the Springboks. There's a lot of questions that we need answered, and we're not going to get to find them out until a little bit closer to this World Cup, when they start experimenting, start working out those combinations.
Yeah. To be fair, if there's anyone that like have a trick up their sleeve, it's definitely Razi, and he'll probably be instructing Yakis neighbor to obviously do something about that. So that would be really fascinating. I don't actually. That's the first time I've heard about that, by the way. So that would be very fascinating to hear if they went with 2 scrum halves in the lineup. But just to touch on, by the way, the point you made in terms of like the injury front, the All Blacks. I mean, you have to remember that back in 2011, they had Aaron Cruden, they had they had another. Player. I forgot who was the other player. I think it was Slade.
Colin Slade, I think, got a crack, yeah.
They had Colin Slade, and of course, I mean, Dan Carter was already injured beforehand, I believe. But they had them ready too, and they both got injured. So they called up, obviously, as we all know, the I guess what is it?
The Beaver, the big old Beaver, the Diva,
the prodigy son of the All Blacks, making his return, which was Stephen McDonald. Is it Stephen McDonald?
Get rid of your Mick and you're all good.
Donald, Stephen Donald. I know it's like Donald, because I know that's like I figured of the coach, but Stephen Donald, of course. That's what so they have done it in the past. So I do believe that's what the Boks could do in terms of like going for it.
You did say it due to injuries was the reason he came back in.
No,
do you think if it gets down to those important games, Valimza says, "Oh, my hamstring's a bit tight, I'm gone," and then Pollard comes back in and steals the show?
That's the thing, is that no, you're all right, but it is because of injury. It's just I don't know, like, because the thing is that if I go back to the squad now, like they have in terms of players on stand. By the way, this is kind of all the players I've said is Lakani Wam, Joseph Tuweba, Lord Diego, Jean-Luc Duplessis, Thomas Latoit, Herschel Yankees, Handré Pollard, Evan Roos, and Gerhard Stinkap. So those are 9 players they've gone with their own standby, which is interesting because it's like you said, like, will any of these players have an opportunity to even play? Because this is, I think, a rule which we're a bit unclear of like, where can players just replace them immediately if they
I
wanted
would
to?
think
I think they
the
can.
reasoning behind
Yeah,
putting a 33-man squad out is that you have to stick to them until injuries mean otherwise. Just
yeah,
because normally, I guess the Rugby Championship, they're quite lenient in terms of players coming in and out, but then normally it is due to injury cover that players are in.
yeah.
So
Understand.
it's a tricky one, isn't it? In terms of I know that someone will know the rule,
Yeah,
and I'm
no.
sure they will
Guys,
let
let
us
us know in the
know.
comments if you guys know the rule. Let us know in the comments if you guys do know that. But
But
yeah,
yeah, it's a bit of a shame for them because a lot of those players, or at least three of those players currently on standby, are dealing with injury or sickness. It's a
mm.
little bit concerning about Ludiacha
Yeah. See,
because
I don't
they
understand
said
how.
they said about him he was getting a checkup or he was going to get
Yeah,
something
a medical
checked
check.
due
Yeah,
to being sick, and it's a lot more serious than they thought. So he has a very good chance of missing the whole of
the whole
France. So
tournament.
hopefully that
Yeah,
is nothing
it's
huge.
crazy.
Well, you'd assume it's something serious though
Yeah,
for him to miss so much. So best wishes to Ludiacha. But the four pack wise, were you surprised that they only went with the two hookers, or due to
no,
Dion
no.
Forey, did you think that
I
is the reason why they
that's the
did?
exact that's what I would have done as well. By the way, I wouldn't had Joseph Dweba. I think he's had too many opportunities, and it's like what you said with like Finley Christie. I know Joseph Dweba hasn't took his opportunity because he hasn't had a game where I've been like, whoa, okay, you know what? Let's take a look at this. Like he hasn't had that. He literally hasn't. I can't think of one moment where in the box where he's been like, oh, okay, you know, he's been pretty impressive this game. Haven't had that in all honesty. But Dylan Foy, I just think he's a great player in terms of utility because he can cover like what 4 positions. So it's so good to have a player like that. So and again, you have to remember he's only third choice in terms of the hookers. So to still have someone like Bongi and Manomi, obviously as your backup is still very good. Obviously, depending on what they go with, because that's still up for debate in terms of who may start and who's coming off the bench. But I guess leading on, we'll then go off then towards the forwards. We'll kind of just go a bit more in terms of discussion there. I mean, I guess in terms of the difference here compared to actually towards the All Blacks is that they've actually gone with 5 props. They actually haven't gone with 6. But I think the reason for this is kind of what I said, where they're thinking that Trevor Ninkani, of course, can play both positions, which this is what I think the All Blacks should have done. In all honesty, guys, because they could have had they could have taken what Tamata Williams or what was it Officer Fassi well, no, just taking both of them really, and maybe leave out Nepalala, whatever you want to do, or like Fletcher Newell, depending on who you want to leave out. Leave one of those players out, and it opens us a spot for another person, maybe like Sean Stevenson, or maybe like Brendan Enor, or I don't know, who else am I forgetting? Who's another player? Finell, maybe as well. So it's just, I think that's what they could have done. But yeah, I'm happy with the Box have gone with 5. I think that's the right choice. Do you think that's a good choice as well?
I think with the amount of cover that they wanted in that loose forward trio and the utility backs as well, it meant that they did have to sacrifice one prop. So in this case, it was more than likely Thomas Detoy, who was very close to making his way in, but then just narrowly missed out. And they could have easily gone with Nakanye or Thomas Detoy due to the fact that they both cover loose head and tight head. But yeah, with the fact that they also, I believe that through taking Mako van Staden, I mean, Kwaka Smith, Dion Forey, and Mostert, like they had to sacrifice somewhere else
Yeah, I
to be able
understand.
to have those guys. Also, Jesper Visa was in there as another guy in that loose forward trio. But the locking wise, I like their locks a lot more than I do like the All Blacks in some
Really?
regards. I do because they've
That's
got Eben
surprising.
Etzebeth, Jean Klein, so 2 specialist 4s. You've got Marvin Ore and RG Snyman. That's already four locks. And then you've got Mostert, who covers lock as well. So you've got 4 main and 1 reserve compared to the All Blacks at the moment, who have got 3
That's true.
until
That's true.
Retallick returns.
I just Yeah, like I understand because the thing is that with me, I rather had the All Blacks. Sorry, with a Box. I actually maybe this is very harsh to say by the way, guys, but I actually would not take Marvin Ore. I actually would have used his spot to bring another loose forward in because and the only reason why I'm saying that is because the Box, when you look at their 6-2 splits, again, they actually haven't done that as much as we think actually in the last year, because they've actually have kind of reverted back towards that 5-3. But if they are going to stick towards that 6-2 within the Rugby World Cup, then they actually do need a bit more. I think just slightly more because they have what Mustard, Foray, Vermeulen, Stadin, Quacker Smith, Colisi, and Detroit. So that's what,
and
7 there.
Visa. They randomly put Visa down
And
the
yes,
bottom
yes, oh, sorry,
and
yes,
off to
Visa
the
as well.
side.
So, but again, for what I'm considering, by the way, I'm taking out Mostert because I'm taking him as my, I guess, like my locking position, if that makes sense. And for me, I guess with Dion Foy, he's one where I don't see you have to. This is maybe I'm just kind of thinking of this, but like back in 2019 World Cup, you knew there were players that weren't going to get game time really. They were just there to make up the numbers in that sense, and obviously be there when ready. And I think Dylan Foy is one of those players. So I'm kind of taking him out of the equation, and that leaves you with what? That's like 6 players. I think you have like you have Jasper Visa and Dwayne Vermeulen. You cover that 8. You have who do you have? You have, I guess, Khaleesi and you could say Quagga Smith. You cover that 6. And then you have like Peter Toit and I'd say what Marco van Staden at the 7. Again, you can put like you can switch it around, put Marco van Staden at the 6 and Quagga Smith as the cover for 7, which is more unlikely, I would say. But it's just one of those where I would like that extra loose forward. I don't know. I have a funny feeling that could have been utilized there. But again, who would it be? Who would it be? I can't really think of a name.
I think Jean-Luc Dupré, some people thought he may have made it in due to being able to cover a little bit of both. I honestly think that if Lud Diacha was 100%, they may have gone with him rather than Marvin Ory. And then I guess that would have added a little bit more stability to the locks and would have meant Mostert had more opportunity in that loose forward trio, maybe as the 7.
That 100% agree. I think that's what it comes down towards is where Lord Diego, like where if he was in, then I would have no problem with the locks at all. It's like the perfect. I think it's probably the best locks out of the whole every nation really in terms of like the I guess depth you have in that position. But yeah, I guess in terms of loose forwards, I'm pretty happy on that front. Again, like I said, they've cover really within every position, so it's kind of nice to have that. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very fascinating to see. But I know, like, I'm going to make kind of my starting lineup for the Bucks very shortly. But what would you say is your starting lineup? Because I'm not going to spoil mine right now. I just want to know your take on what would your starting lineup would be. Because again, maybe we'll actually do this. Oh, should we do? No, we'll just do this for the loose forwards because I think I'm just interested just in terms of loose forwards. What would your loose forward trio be for the Bucks?
Well, at the moment, based off form, I would say that they would look at Maka van Staden as 6.
Okay.
This is relying on, at the moment, the fact that Sia Khaleesi's still in.
Yeah, we're not thinking of Khaleesi in a sense. Understand.
I would say they'll go van Staden at number 6, Peter Toy as 7, and Dwayne Vermeulen number 8. I believe that was the combination for them that worked very well in that first game up against the Australians. The slight problem with that is with Jasper Visa just not quite finding his feet yet for the box. It means that off the bench, you've got a little bit of a concern of, have you got enough grunt from those players who make their way off the bench? Because to be honest, just to transition somewhere else here, I believe that the Springboks might actually be more likely to go with a 5-3 split for a majority of their Rugby World Cup games this year.
Yeah, I agree, actually. With the decisions they've made in terms of the Scrum-half, it just makes me completely think they're going to go with a 5-3 split because there's no way you can have 4 Scrum-halves and then choose, obviously, the outside backs as well along with that, and even the centers. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. So I actually do agree with you that if they're going to go with a 5-3 split, but I wouldn't be surprised, and this is where, like, the Bucks have their tricks, if they reverted back towards like 6-2, for like, for the knockout stages, if that makes sense. So like maybe they go for the final. They go, you know what? We're gonna go back.
I think they'll go for the 7-1.
Yeah, exactly.
Just have the one spare guy.
Just go with a scrum half, and all the rest are forwards. I wouldn't be surprised. But
that would be some power late in a game, wouldn't it?
Of course, that would be just. I would. If there's one team to do it, it'd definitely be the Bucks. But no, I think that's kind of it, really, just in terms of, I guess, the Bucks as well as the All Blacks. I mean, we can quickly just mention, I guess, the other sides as well with England. I believe you've mentioned this. Announced a squad as well as Samoa. I mean, just with England first. I mean, just to your knowledge, just flat out there. Was there any, I guess, glaring omissions you thought that were like you're surprised about, or were you pretty happy overall with the squad there?
Overall, it looks like a good mix of older and younger players. I think I saw a stat that was about 14 of the players from the 2019 World Cup have now retained their spot. I think Arundel was very unlucky because it seems to be currently, tactically wise, they don't seem to have a plan that has him in there. Instead, they have
This
got
is
that
where
little bit
yeah.
of that switch. But it'll be interesting for them. I feel like at the end of the day for England, people thought that they were on the easy side of the draw to a certain extent until they started to realise how good Samoa are going recently, how Japan at the moment aren't in the best form, but if they can find
Who
it,
knows?
can beat anyone on any given day. Los Pumas, of course, they will be excited. They have also announced their side. I see one of the Sevens boys in Rodrigo Isgro made his way through.
Good to see.
Luciano Gonzalez missing out, but he was playing for the Argentina XV, so perhaps he's right there ready to go.
And Kremer
Just
back in
in
as well?
case. Marcos Kremer, the angry man, going to be back in there.
Happy to see that.
First red card of the competition. Would you put your money on it?
Who are they playing first? Who are they playing first?
I think that they've got...
I think it's England, right?
Maybe.
I think it is England.
First?
If it's
They'd
England,
close
then
on
yes.
someone, wouldn't he?
Yes, yeah, I agree. I'll put all the money down on him. I mean, there's not really another player I can think of that kind of gets red cards as often as him. I think he's like, if there's a player that you're just like, oh,
Lavanini.
But yeah, well, one of the two, at least one of those two. But I guess in terms of, I guess, yeah, I mean, England, just like you said, yeah, I think overall, because the thing is, if they're back three, they probably would go with like what, Freddie Stewart. You have like what, Anthony Watson, I'd say is your 14, and then the 11. I mean, who would be the number 11? That's the because that's where Ondo could probably fit if they wanted to utilize him there.
Yeah, but they went against him, didn't they, in terms of the selection? Because who has been playing number 11? Like, in terms of last year's internationals,
They
who do they have out there? I think they actually went with Johnny May quite a bit in last year's
See, he's
Six
dipped off
Nations.
so much.
Maybe.
I've had this for a long time, by the way, guys. Like, since that 2019 World Cup, I think his form has been... He hasn't been the same player since. I've been very clear on that front. But again, he's someone that kind of reminds me of like where he's just a very consistent performer. So you understand the reasons why he gets selected. So yeah, I understand the reasons why. I don't think he's a player which, in my mind, I would start. I would actually go with someone like the young, I'd go with Harry Underwood in that position, or maybe even if you want a big man, go with Joe Compton-Singler there. But I don't know. We'll see what they do on that front. But I guess in terms of Samoa, I wanted to touch on Samoa because the big name that kind of caught my eye, and hopefully it caught yours as well, was Ben Lamb introduced into this Samoa squad because he wasn't literally part of this. He wasn't part of the Samoa team at all in terms of the Pacific Nations Cup. So he just his name just gets included. I don't know what happened there. Like, was this always the plan, or was this I guess to throw a few teams off guard? Like, what was your kind of impression on that?
Well, I wasn't actually sure if it was a typo or not because, of course, we had seen Jack Lamb playing
exactly. Is this like another
in
player?
the Pacific Nations Cup? So I was like, wait, did they put the wrong name there, or is Ben Lamb supposed to be? I saw that Tim Nanai Williams has been left out of their side just for now, but there is still that one extra player who they are going to be adding in. Another player missing out, Michael Curry. There were actually a few guys that people were like, hang on, where's he at? Why has he disappeared? Stacey Ely, another player from Super Rugby Pacific, who did end up missing out.
Yeah, I feel bad for him.
Yeah. I mean, although saying that, he didn't really have a huge amount of impact, I guess, in those other games, sadly. So just wasn't quite
they didn't have a really
step up.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Fijian World Cup squad?
Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of the Fiji Jura, players got selected, which is kind of expected because when you have that experience within Super Rugby and you get that kind of we're playing against the New Zealand sides as well as the Australians, then I expected a lot of them to be in that. And I mean, I'm just really I'm actually looking forward towards seeing Ikanaveri actually because he's been in great form for Fiji actually in the Pacific Nations Cup, and hopefully he can kind of translate that within the World Cup. But I'm trying to think, was there a name? Actually, the name I'm actually not sure because I can't think of it on the top of my head. Was Hobosi selected?
He was, yes. Although he didn't play in the Pacific Nations Cup.
That's why I wanted to check because I mean, again, we all know how good Hobosi is, by the way, guys. Because in the opening season of Fiji Jura, he was the player that everyone was like, oh my, like, geez, this is a player for the future. But I don't know how they're going to do this now because again, with Fiji, I think the one area which I'm actually most excited to see, well, I'm interested to see who they pick is really the centers, because in my opinion, I think they have three. You could arguably say world-class centers in the sense like where they have Semi Radradra, who's like obviously has the highest ceiling, of course, of any of the bunch because he just has the experience under his belt as well. But then you have someone like Asofo Masi, who we've seen within Super Rugby, had a brilliant season, and then you also have Ravovo as well. So I just don't know. I actually don't know who they're going to select here because again, Ravovo played more as a 12, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, although they did actually play him out on the left wing.
That's what I'm
in
saying.
One of those games.
You can shift, yeah.
But then saying that, you have not mentioned one man's name yet, which is Waisia Noiafalevu. And he plays 13. They've actually put Tuisova down as a centre on their list, which means he could be playing 12.
Oh my gosh.
So they've got stacks and stacks of talent.
Centres.
It's going to be tricky. I mean, luckily for them, their nines have been going pretty decently, and Frank Lamani, Kuravoli, and also Matawalu. They didn't go with Ben Vulavula in the overall announced side, which I think surprised quite a few people, not going for experience, instead giving Caleb Munson to Tatala that opportunity there. But yeah, it's definitely a Fijian side that I can see doing well in this upcoming Rugby World Cup. I just hope that we are correct in that regard and they are able to perform, because at the end of the day, 3 from 3 in the Pacific Nations Cup, pretty decent way to get going. Aussie, they are going to be announcing their side either tomorrow or today when this podcast comes out. I believe they're announcing today.
I know they're announcing their squad tomorrow. And I think this podcast will probably come out, I'd say, on Friday. Was it? I think we said.
What day are we on today?
We're on Wednesday.
Wednesday, aren't we? Wednesday. So probably come out tomorrow.
This pod will come out tomorrow. So we'll find out, obviously, what the Wallabies kind of have in store for us. But again, I kind of expect really more of a. Again, the Wallabies haven't made too many changes actually in terms of their squad. So they're actually the one squad where I'm kind of like, okay, there shouldn't be as many shocks in that sense. But yeah, I mean, I'm even looking right now, by the way, in terms of Fiji, in terms of the comments, in terms of when the announcement was made. And the most liked one is just said, yeah, can you explain why Ben Vulavula, our most experienced fly half, is not on the roster? We hope this is a typo. It's interesting because a lot of people are now saying that. And the thing is that, like, to have, like, I don't know, shocking that players like Malasa and Dorso C, who have offered us nothing but poor decisions making and countless errors, have been picked over Vulavula and Botu. Yeah, I really hope it pays. I think I definitely choose Dorsi. I mean, he's good within Super Rugby. I think he proved that. I mean, he was a good 15, I thought, overall for them. But maybe I'm mistaken on that.
One of the tricky parts for them is I believe they've gone with Mwala as a fullback. Yeah. And some people still feel like he's not quite suited for that fullback jersey. Instead, they like to see him out on the wing. So then you've only really got Drua Sisi at the back.
I would choose him.
And then, I mean, that's the thing. Celestino Ravatamunda, I believe, has actually got fullback slightly up his sleeve well, if needed. But
I wouldn't choose him.
Villamoni Botitu, I think it's slightly understandable why he ended up missing out, just because of, like you mentioned, so many centres being there, and the fact that they tried to play him at centre in that game up against Japan. So he was competing against like 7 or 8 other guys, who most of which already were being selected.
What would you say is their kind of like there? Because maybe I'm wrong. What I'm about to say here. I'll give you my starting back line for the Fijians, and I know your one as well. So just you can think of it also while I make mine. But I'm saying Frank Lamani has to start. He's the scrum-half in my opinion in terms of Fiji. For the 10, I mean, because again they haven't chosen Ben Vulavula here, so we're really down towards what? Caleb Muntez, as well as I think Taleo, right? If I'm not mistaken, right? Those are the 2 10s they've gone with.
Yeah. So Muntz and Teller, yeah.
Yeah, Muntz and Teller. So I'm probably going with Muntz there, I think, just because I've seen him more for Fiji. I mean, maybe I'm wrong on that front, but that's who I'd probably go with. In terms of the centers, this is probably the most difficult one. But personally, I would actually go with Radradra as the 12. And I would go with Masi as the number 13. I know it's a big call, but I want to have both of them in the centers because I think they're just too good to not have them. And I guess in terms of the wingers, that's where you would probably go with Volvo as the 11 because I think that they've been utilizing him a lot there. In the 14, that's where I think you probably go with Hobosi. That's where I probably put Hobosi in. And then, or you can maybe switch that around if you wanted to, because Hobossi is really more as an 11, you could say. I don't know. I mean, Hobossi can play at 14, right? You can play at 14.
I think so, although I think we've only really seen him
He
out
really,
on that left
he was
wing.
really more of 11. Oh, do I leave Revolver on? Because he's not really seen as a 14, though. You know what? I'm leaving Revolver out. I'm making the judgment call. I'm putting Hobossi as 11 because I just think he's the if you put him there, he's like the best player you'll ever have. And then 14, you probably go with. I mean, you have Ratumala. Yeah, probably go with Ratumala. I think just because. Yeah, he's just a solid player overall. And then I'd probably go with Dorsey as the number 15. I'm not sure if that's good or not. Well, let me know. Do you think that's kind of good, or do you think I've missed out some key players there?
I would probably have a couple changes there,
Okay,
mainly.
what would you do?
But then some of mine might be a little bit more, I guess, tactical in terms of what I've seen from some of the Pacific Nations Cup games.
Yeah, understand.
Because basing it off that last game, I would almost actually put Semi Kuravuli in the starting 9 position and have Lamani come off the bench purely because of that impact that Lamani seems to be able to bring later on in a fixture. He seems to always be able to create that opportunity that the Drua or the Flying Fijians need later.
You wouldn't have Lamani as a starter.
I mean, more than likely he would be starting, but I just feel like I quite like seeing Kuravuli and the Lamani combo.
Can you see him coming off the bench then, Kuravuli? Like, can you see him making
a little bit? Although I think they're more likely to go with Pene Matawalu in that combination if Kuravuli isn't starting. So that's the only reason why I put him in, just because of the form that he's had recently. I would go with Caleb Muntz at 10, mainly because he seems to be the one that they want to give that chance to. In the centres, it's a pretty tricky one because, I mean, Waisia Naiatalevu, I believe, will be the captain for a majority of this Rugby World Cup. So I would probably end up going with Tui Sova as 12, just because of that pure crash ball that he's able to offer. And then either Radradra or Naiatalevu on the outside, probably edging towards Naiatalevu. And the reason I say that is I think Radradra could offer quite a bit as well off the bench for them. We saw what he was able to do in that first game of the Pacific Nations Cup, how he just cut through Tonga like a hot knife through butter. Then the back 3, I would go Celestino Ravatamunda at number 11, just for maybe the first or second game, purely because we haven't seen Vinaya Habosi play yet this year. But once he starts finding his form again, I think he will take that jersey back. Jeta Wainenyola, I would go with as number 14, just because he's got pure pace. He's always very entertaining to watch down that wing. And then number 15, Mwala's not very popular. Drua Sisi, some people aren't sold on him, but I think it's got to be one of those two. So I would probably edge it to probably Drua Sisi as the man at number 15. There you go. Yeah, a few changes there. I mean, the thing is, they're probably not going to go with that lineup that I just mentioned. It's just,
we're completely wrong.
You know, in an ideal world, I'd like to see a few of those guys rewarded for their form in the Pacific Nations Cup.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. But we'll leave it there, guys. I think again, we've kind of given you a general just overall basis of what in terms of our reaction towards all the squads that have been announced so far. Again, we'll probably cover another video, I guess, in terms of the future reactions as well, just in terms of squad announcements. Because again, as we all know, the Wallabies haven't announced a squad just yet. We'll cover that as well as a few other teams, because I believe we're still waiting to hear from France, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ireland. What are the other big names? There's like Wales, I believe, you haven't named their squad yet. So again, we'll probably do another video just like this, guys. Give you our reaction on that front. But besides that, just hope you guys have a good day. Like the video, guys. Really like the video, guys, and definitely subscribe to our channel, guys. We want to get to at least 100 by the end of the month, if that's possible. If we can just get to that goal into the Rugby World Cup, and then we'll see what happens from there. But guys, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Subscribe obviously towards both of our channels if you haven't, RugbyH as well as the Kiwi lads. And besides that, we'll see you guys next time.